Crymachina. This is a game developed by Furyu and published by NIS America. If you've played the game Crystar, also developed by Furyu, this game is essentially a spiritual successor of that game. Not connected to it in any way, but it shares a lot of thematic similarities, and obviously the title having Cry in it. It's another sci-fi story-driven JRPG that's probably gonna tug at your heartstrings to some degree. I've been really excited to try out this game, and thank you NIS America for providing to me a review copy of the game. So with all that said, let's jump in and talk about Crymachina. So Crymachina is an action RPG. If you've played games like Crystar or even games like Code Vein, you're probably going to find a lot of similarity in that gameplay style. We'll talk more about the gameplay later in this video, but let's go ahead and just talk about what this game is and the plot and the setting and characters and things like that. Crymachina is set way in the future, long after mankind's extinction, within a vast outer space structure known as Eden. Here, self-evolving artificial life forms called Deus Ex Machina operate with a single goal: human restoration. However, when Propator, the first Deus Ex Machina and overseer of Eden, is lost, its disappearance opens a rift between the remaining Deus Ex Machina. There are 4 main characters in this game, and 3 of which are playable. The whole cast here is made up of female characters, and the first one I'll talk about is Leben. This is essentially your first main playable character. Leben is considered exceptional and is referred to as the Chosen One. Our next playable character is Mikoto, and she's been here in Eden longer than Leben, and she acts as a mentor to her, providing her with guidance and support, and she's also an avid cinephile. And our last main playable character is Ami. She's gentle, she's deeply compassionate, and she also has a very high obsession with family. So not only does she just love all of our cast here, but she also has a pretty fierce nature to her as well. And our last character, who's not playable, but she's one of our main characters nonetheless, is Enoa. Enoa is the 8th Deus Ex Machina. She's basically in charge of reconstructing the human psyche. She is the creator of the virtual world that all of our main characters hang out at, basically our hub world. She's one of our allies, and she's doing her best to help us reach our ultimate goal of becoming real humans. Now, if anything that I just explained to you regarding its setting or its plot or its characters feel like it's a lot of information all at once, maybe there's some terminology that you're just not getting right off the bat, that's kind of how this whole game is going to feel for you in a lot of areas. This is an incredibly sci-fi game that's going to throw a ton of terminology at you, and you're just going to have to strap in for the ride and try to gain as much knowledge of all this stuff as it's coming at you, because there's not a whole lot of time to just take a breath and really try to understand everything that's going on. But let's at first just go ahead and talk about the good. In my opinion, the best thing that this game has going for it is its setting, is its lore. There's a ton here about the history of this world and how you got here, and you know, the history of all of this Deus Machina, all of the artificial intelligence that's self-evolved over the years, and the people who created that technology. I think there's a ton here that you can dive into and become invested in, and I like its setting. I think it's pretty cool, especially its initial setup. One of the first things that you find out is not only is this taking place way into the future where there's artificial intelligence who have essentially become these huge gods, but there was even a, I think it's called centrifugal syndrome, which is a big disease that happened that ended up wiping out, I think it's like 20% of all of humankind. And this was a disease with a 100% fatality rate. No one, if you got this disease, you just died. Very shortly after 20% of humanity was wiped out, then basically everyone just started going to war at each other. And that has led us to where our main setting is here in the game. And like I said, I think a lot of that is probably some of the most interesting piece of this story. So for me, if I'm being fully honest, the best part of this game for me was that central hook, to reel me into its plot and its setting. That was the best part of this game for me. But let's move on to the mixed, and here I just want to talk about its overall presentation. I'm talking about its visual style, graphics. On its visual style and its presentation, it's a very kind of standard anime style of video game. You'll pretty much know if this game is for you, stylistically speaking, just by looking at it one time. It's nothing that we haven't seen before. It's kind of standard. Graphics really aren't anything to write home about. I don't know. It serves its story and its plot and its setting properly, but it's really nothing to write home about in that regard either. And I think I'll actually include combat here in the mixed as well. And by combat, I literally just mean the way that you attack. Just whenever you're fighting enemies, that's kind of all here in the mixed category for me. And other than just using each character's primary ability to attack, you also have these things called auxiliaries, which are basically secondary weapons that you can swap in and out as you find and collect different auxiliaries throughout the game. And with these, you basically just use R1 and L1, or whichever platform you're using, the top triggers to implement those weapons. Using your primary weapon and these auxiliaries are going to be the main way that you're going to be fighting enemies and stuff, but you do have another option of attacking that's a bit more on the defensive side of doing things, and that's with using your long range weapon, which is for the most part, it's a gun. I actually never found myself using the gun in combat whatsoever. I really only ever used the gun if there was some sort of, I don't know, puzzle to be solved where there was a switch that you had to hit that was far away and you had to use your gun or your, whatever you were using as a projectile weapon to hit that item. Using that defensive gun type item, it's just not anything that I ever used. Enemies can also attack you, and they have special attacks that they will do where a big pink flash will appear on the screen and you can parry those and you can dodge and get, the advantage on an enemy for dodging or parrying at a right time. Ultimately, what's putting combat in the mixed category for me, though, is just the fact that I just didn't really have a great time in doing the combat. It's not that the combat system fails, really. It's not that it doesn't work or it's super clunky or anything like that. No, the game is pretty fast-paced for the most part, and you can kill enemies pretty fast, and you can kind of be methodical by choosing your auxiliaries and things like that. I just never really felt like I was doing a ton. I don't know really how else to describe it other than just maybe I just wasn't having a fun time actually in combat. Anytime that I parried successfully or anything like that, there was nothing in me that felt like, yeah! I don't know, combat just felt really samey throughout, and we'll kind of get into the monotony of this game here as we move on to the bad. And really, like I just said, this game is very monotonous. It's incredibly repetitive. Enemy designs, just like dungeon design in general. This game is incredibly repetitive. It recycles a ton of assets and just nothing feels like it really changes up its formula whatsoever. This entire game, I'm not gonna lie, was just boring. It was just, other than its initial hook in the beginning and the setting that you're in, the game was just a boring slog to get through. And since we're still just on gameplay, let's talk about things like dungeon design, level design, and things like that. And man, this game made Final Fantasy XIII feel like an open world masterpiece in level design. Like, this game is so unbelievably linear. As soon as you hop into a map, you're literally just going from point A to point B. There might be a cutscene somewhere in the middle of that, and then you have a boss at the end, and then you're thrown back into the hub world. It's incredibly repetitive. Enemy designs rarely ever change up. You might have a different style of boss that you'll fight, but just general enemies and things like that. Nothing here just felt unique or like it switched up anything whatsoever. I really, this was truly a hallway simulator of a dungeon design. It was just so boring. Even whenever the game tries to implement something cool, like a railway where you're grinding on these rails that are appearing in front of you as you're sliding through. It's just so that you can kind of look at the surroundings for a little bit. You can't do anything while you're on these literally these like railroaded sequences in the game, and you're just sitting there just waiting for it to end so you can get to the next part. And then on top of that, whenever you're looking around, there's some kind of cool designs, but for the most part, you just feel like you're in these big empty spaces, big empty rooms where there's not a whole lot to just stop and look at, except for maybe one area where there's these big whales swimming around. I thought that looked kind of cool, but for the most part, there's really nothing too unique or visually stunning about any of these very, very railroaded like hallways of levels. It was just so boring. And when it comes to just exploration, like I said, this is mostly just hallways and hallways and hallways. Not a whole lot to explore. Although, like I did mention, there were these puzzles that would pop up every now and then where you'd have to do some type of platforming thing, or maybe you would have to do something where you have to shoot something far away, or shoot a bunch of buttons, or run around and hit a bunch of buttons in a certain amount of time, and then it unlocks maybe a hidden area where you can fight a bunch of enemies and get a new item, like an auxiliary or something like that. That's really the extent of it, and everything is so blatantly obvious. There's no exploring to be done. There's no sense of curiosity that you have. There's like, you never ever feel like, oh, what's behind that corner? Because there's never anything behind that corner. If there's a puzzle to be done in the game, it's obvious. You just start doing it, and either you give up on it because it's so boring, or you just do it in like less than 2 minutes, and then you get a new weapon or item or something. Also, when you're not exploring the dungeons and you're not doing combat or doing boss battles or anything like that, you have the hub world, which is basically this lounge area for you and the other 3 main characters in the story. There are required conversations that you are supposed to engage in to continue progressing the story, called tea parties. These are literally just conversations. Some are optional, some are mandatory, and sometimes the mandatory ones feel totally optional, and sometimes the optional ones feel totally mandatory. This is just filler. This is all just like an aspect of the game that I felt like could have been implemented in other cutscenes in another way, other than making me have to scroll to a menu so I could go to something called the Tea Party. I know that they'll have DLC later on where you can change the costumes of these characters so that whenever you're seeing them have these conversations, they're dressed differently and things like that. It just all felt like padding. It all felt like, why couldn't you reveal this information to me in a different way? Now I just have to sit here and watch like 6 minutes of cutscenes just to learn about what my next goal is, or just to learn about what happened in the past, or to find out what your favorite movie is, or why you're in love with these characters, and why everyone is female, and why everyone is also like weirdly into each other. Like, it all felt like, why is this happening? Why do I want to sit here and do any of this? I don't. Why is this happening? And you would think that with a game like this called Crymachina, it's the spiritual successor to Crystar. It's like they want you to think, oh man, this story-driven narrative game where you have these, AI, like these robots with human souls, and they're dealing with a lot of personal things, and they have memories coming back to them from back whenever they were humans and things like that. You just expect, oh, there's going to be a really gripping tale here. There's going to be something that's going to pull at my heartstrings. No. To be honest, every character here, all of our main characters, I felt were very unlikable. None of them had anything about them that made me really sympathetic towards them or their situation. Sure, maybe one of them, or even a few of them, have people like family members who have died, and then they're having to face that emotional turmoil within them, and they're dealing with things like the loss of family and newfound friends and all this stuff, and it follows a very overdone and oversaturated trope in JRPGs, and power of friendship, yada yada yada. That can be done well. It's not done well here, and I didn't care about any of these characters at all. They're mostly very self-centered. They're very nihilistic. Like, they're incredibly depressing for the most part, not in any way that makes you consider your own life or makes you think about the world around you. No, you just see these characters talking the way that they talk to each other. And you're just like, gosh, what a bunch of losers. Like, I can't, maybe I'm just being, like, these are just fake characters, obviously. I can't just be mean to fake characters. But wow, I didn't like any of them. And then you have all of these different Deus Ex Machina, like Knowing and Anthropos and Lethia and Logos. You just have all of them. Like, you can just tell that this game is trying to be incredibly philosophically profound in what it's trying to say about humanity and the way that we treat technology and the way that we treat humanity. And it's using a lot of Greek terminology and Latin terminology, and it's really trying to be something like a Xenogears, Charles Jung or Nietzschean philosophical kind of way of thinking. Like, it doesn't ever land the mark. It just feels really pretentious the entire time. I'm actually a really big fan of games that try to do lots of storytelling or try to portray lots of meaning through symbolism or through a lot of ancient literature or a lot of philosophical terms and philosophical ideas from, old thinkers and things like that. If they can do that in the way of showing us those things and not telling us those things, I actually really like that in games. But like I said, this game just feels like it's so up its own butt about that sort of stuff. It never feels smart. It just feels like it's putting all of that in your face and not even asking you to think about those things. They're just using these names and using these images like the Christian cross, like on a lot of things, and being incredibly nihilistic about things at the same time. Like, it's just pretentious, and I didn't really like or appreciate any of it. It actually felt very apparent to me that it wasn't going to be a story for me. It wasn't going to be plot or characters that were going to be pulling me in. I was really hoping that it was going to be these big boss battles and be these dungeon exploration events in the game that was going to pull me deeper into the game and make me fall in love with it. But it just never happened. The gameplay was boring. It was stale. It was repetitive. Enemy design, level design, none of it felt engaging or fun. It all just felt like, well, I guess the difficulty is just ramping up. Oh, look, now I'm a little underleveled for this spot, so I better go grind out some of these repetitive enemy battles and just gain some levels. And it just felt incredibly underwhelming. It just really was disappointing. This was a game that I was looking forward to. I like action RPGs. I liked the setting. I liked the sci-fi nature of all of it. It definitely was advertising itself as this game that was going to make me think and have a good time doing it. And none of that happened. None of that was true for me. And I don't just mean to be so overly harsh about this game, but I was just disappointed with it. And I'm grateful that I was able to get a review copy of this game. So don't stop sending me codes. I'm sure there's a banger out there somewhere. But for me personally, Crymachina was just a dud. It was not something that I enjoyed. Maybe for you, this is a story that might speak to you. You might find some enjoyment in these characters. You might like the imagery that's here, the philosophical ideas that they try to present. Maybe this is something that you want. Maybe this is something that you are looking forward to, and I hope that you have a good time if you do decide to go out and get this game. Personally, it's not a big recommendation from me. So if you value my opinion and you're just gonna do what I say wait for a sale. This is not something that I would necessarily go out and buy at full price, but hey, if any of it sounds cool to you, if you've seen the gameplay here, if you've seen the visuals and its style, and you like these character designs and you like the gameplay, maybe you've even checked out the demo. Definitely check out the demo. Give that a shot before you decide to pull the trigger on this game. I definitely think there's some fans out there that this is going to be a good time for. For me personally, if you're like me, it just kind of annoyed me. It was a little disappointing, and that's really all that there is for me to say about Crymachina. If you enjoyed this review, please go ahead down below and let me know why you didn't like this game, why you do like this game. I want to hear your thoughts about Crymachina. And while you're down there, go ahead and hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell as well, so that you're notified whenever new videos like this go up. There's also a link down below to join the Discord, where you can join a community of like-minded video game players. If you like JRPGs or story-driven content, that's a lot of what my community is about. We love talking about video games. We would love to see you there. Actually, I have a review coming out pretty soon. Later today, I'm actually filming a review with my buddy DJ, aka Mushroom Man, for a review on Disgaea 7. So if you're looking forward to that, definitely subscribe and hit the notification bell. But anyways, with all of that said, this has been my review of Crymachina. I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.